Hey everybody, welcome to our weekly Bible reading check-in. We have the goal of reading the Bible twice in 2026, and we're encouraging the congregation here in Conroe to do it with us. And we hope that all of you out there in wherever you are reading with us. So we're going to talk about it. This is Mike, I'm Andrew, and we're going to talk about 2nd Chronicles today.
2nd Chronicles. Not a read most people get into, I think.
No, but significantly more interesting than 1st Chronicles.
Yes, a lot more action.
Yes. Basically what we've got in 2nd Chronicles is we start with the building of the temple. We get Solomon at sort of the height of his reign, which is nice. And then we get the division of the kingdom. We've already seen that when we read Kings. But we get the division of the kingdom, Rehoboam and Jeroboam. And then we just sort of go down those lists of kings again, and we hear their stories.
But this one's pretty much focused on Judah.
I think
Israel
so.
only shows up when Judah kind of interacts. So when Jehoshaphat interacts with Ahab or one of those others, that's pretty much what it is.
So this was a point we made with Kings. I think a point you made with Kings is that when we're reading the book of Kings and we're getting all of those kings and their stories, we're primarily following the kings of Israel.
And that's what it feels like.
And you know, Ahab becomes a main character, and the prophets who interact with the Israelite kings and so forth. And so, very different when we get to Chronicles because we're kind of getting the other side of that story now.
Right.
Why do you think that is? Do you have a working theory?
Well, my theory goes back to something we talked about before. This is written later. This is written to be more encouraging. This is written to be more about their identity as a people. And so I think that's why the highlight is Judah. They're the ones that lasted longer. They're the ones that basically return, although there's others that return with them. It's that kingdom that's essentially set up. It's those kings that we still have that kind of line of kings, though there won't be any here once captivity actually ends. But they're still able to look forward. Like they didn't get destroyed. So that's, I think, why we're sticking with that. Plus it's the temple imagery.
Yeah.
And I noticed we see a lot of reforms. So kings might say, Hezekiah reformed and did this, but then here we get a whole lot more detail.
That's right.
In Jehoshaphat, we get a whole lot more detail, and we get a whole lot more detail about Manasseh's kind of conversion toward the end of his life. Things like that. A whole lot more detail about Josiah, I think. And it all seemed, or almost all seemed to be around this idea of reforming and coming back to the covenant. This is what I talked about a couple videos ago in the side questions. The kings were measured by, were they faithful to God covenantally? Did they worship God? Kind of the same thing. Did they allow foreign worship or idolatry? And so there's a real heavy focus here on, no, they did not. No, they did not. And then a lot of the things that went in with that. So I think that's a lot of it. They're trying to reestablish this kind of movement to go forward.
Yeah. I don't think I realized until reading through it this time how much 1st and 2nd Chronicles is just about the temple. It seems like if there is a main character in this book, it's the temple, which is kind of weird to say.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that started back last week when we were talking about 1st Chronicles, and you get all of the preparations that David made. I mean, David did a lot of things as king, but the focus is on what David did for the temple.
And the same's true for Solomon.
Yeah.
Right? We don't really hear much about the other stuff. It's the temple.
Yeah. And another, let me just throw this theme out there as well, because I mentioned this last week and maybe even the week before in preparation for Chronicles. The emphasis in Chronicles is much more positive than it is in Kings.
Yes.
And I think we continue to see that. It's not to say there aren't bad choices that Kings make in these stories. It's not just everything is nice.
They're not editing out the fact that Jehoshaphat went to work with Israel that time, or Josiah got a little proud of himself and went to war with Egypt, even though they don't edit that out. But they don't go in, they don't dwell on that.
But one of the things I did notice, and I've continued to notice, is that most of the negative stories seem to be there because they directly impact the temple.
Yep.
It's like they did this wrong, and the temple was raided because of their bad choice.
Exactly.
Or something like
There
that.
was a lot of that. Did you notice how many times in 2nd Chronicles did the temple not get destroyed, but get stripped?
Yes.
It was like 3 or 4 times, I think,
Yeah.
something like that, where all the valuables, either the king did it to pay off somebody, or Egypt did it, or somebody else did it. Never
Yeah.
got destroyed until the very, very end. But imagine, right? This was supposed to be God's seat. It was David and Solomon did all that, and then it gets stripped down to nothing.
Yeah.
Or how many times did it just get the doors shut on it and it's kind of disused and disrepaired? That kind of blows my mind. That
Yeah.
kind of stuff would happen, and sometimes very quickly. There would be a reform, and then maybe that next generation or two, it would almost be like either they lock the doors or they just set up other altars
Yeah.
and things in there.
And that's the story of Hezekiah to Josiah that
Right.
you're describing there. I mean,
Right.
Hezekiah restores the temple worship, celebrates this great Passover, and then Manasseh, his son Ahaz, and then by Josiah, the doors are shut. They've lost the law. They
Right.
haven't celebrated the Passover.
Right.
It's unreal.
It seems impossible, and
Yeah.
yet I think there's a lesson there for us. Like, it happens quickly.
It
We've
happened
got to
to
be
them.
very,
It can
very
happen to us.
valiant, or very vigilant, I should say. Valiant too, but vigilant.
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 Vigilant. There's a reel.
There's another
got it.
reel.
Very good. Well, what else? We were talking before we hit record. It's kind of like, what do you say? We've already talked about a lot of these kings. I don't know. What do we need to say about these kings, or which king stuck out to you as particularly interesting this go round?
Well, I did think, again, we got a lot more about many of their reforms, which I think, to your point, this is about correcting worship. As I said, that's how these kings were judged in Kings. Did they worship God, or did they fix it?
Yeah.
And if the answer was yes, well, then they walked in the ways of David, and it might say, but they didn't do this, that, or the other, and they were all imperfect. But if the answer was no, well, then they walked in the ways of Jeroboam. And we see that here again. So it seemed like there was a lot more emphasis on those things. So guys like Asa, guys like, again, Jehoshaphat, particularly Hezekiah and Josiah, as you said. But again, even Manasseh, his whole life, he reigned for 50-something years, and he was really, really bad. And it's this Hezekiah's son. And Hezekiah was one of the greatest kings ever. And then his son goes completely in the opposite direction. But we're told, partly why. They had intermarriages with the other kingdom. They had bad advisors. But Manasseh, to me, is one of the more interesting ones because he was so bad. And then he repents, right? And he was so bad where it said he put idols on every corner in Jerusalem, right? And they put all this stuff in the temple. And then he turned around and undid it all.
Yeah.
So you can, right? That's another lesson. You can undo it, at least in this life.
Yeah. By the way, I think I misspoke a minute ago. I said Ahaz was Manasseh's son. It's Ammon who's Manasseh's son.
Ammon.
Believe it or not, it's kind of easy to get some of these guys' names mixed up.
There's a lot of Asas and Ahazes and J Kings. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just flipping through, trying to jog my memory of a couple of things, and I was looking for the king. One of the stories that stuck out to me is actually one phrase in the story, and I'm off the top of my head, Mike, I can't remember which king it was. So if you remember,
Maybe I can.
but there was one king that it struck me because one of the things we see often throughout this story is throughout these stories is the king would die and he would be buried with the kings in the city of David. And there was one king in particular, and it's escaping me which one it was, early on in the book, I think, where he died and he was so evil and everybody hated
Right.
him that they just didn't even
Right.
bother to bury him with the
They
kings.
didn't bury him with the kings. There was actually a few.
That's in, it looks like, I said early on, it looks like chapter 21, maybe verse 20. They did not
Jehoram.
Did not bury him in the
Right, but not in the tombs of the kings.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting, because we talk about how do we measure these kings, how do we consider them good or bad, and a lot of times it's God making a statement. Here's a king that was so bad because of the way he treated God and the temple and worship that the people even acknowledged that he wasn't worthy of that honor.
Even the people can see it, right?
Yeah.
Which tells you something. Again, there's still good people and wise people. You're kind of stuck with your king. You're stuck with your government. You have to go along with that. And that has a huge impact on things. But yeah, I think him, and I think it seemed like the next guy. There were that was, I think, one that stuck out, but there were several that came because of course the kingships seem like they get shorter and shorter and shorter toward the end.
Yeah.
That's not an absolute, but some guys it's a couple of years, some guys it's a few months, some guys it's 10 years. We're not seeing these 40 years and 30 years anymore.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with the decay and the deterioration of the whole culture.
Yeah. Things descended to chaos pretty quickly. And that was one of the things we noticed when we talked about the Book of Kings was sort of the chaos at the end of Judah's line, because you get Josiah, who's this great king, and he's depicted as a really great king in Chronicles as well. Mm-hmm. But then by the time he dies, it's his three sons that sort of pop up, and they're very quick, short reigns.
Yep.
Many of them are sort of puppet kings in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. The Egyptians set one up, the Assyrians set one up, things like that.
And that's the end.
That's the end. That's the end. Well, let me go to the end real quick. If we want to go back, that's fine. But one of the things I teased early on was that the ending of Second Chronicles is going to be different than the ending of Second Kings. So when we get that story in Second Kings, we come down to the end of Judah's line of kings, and they go to captivity in Babylon, and we get this one statement about the king kind of being treated well in Babylon, mm-hmm. but he's very much in Babylon. Mm-hmm. Second Chronicles ends very differently because it ends with this decree by a Persian king. So we've got the sort of the world powers that rise and fall over the course of Chronicles. We've got the Assyrians, we've got the Babylonians, and at the very end we learn that the Persians have risen to power. And it's striking to me that Chronicles ends on this note. We've talked about how positive Chronicles is. It ends on this really positive note that Cyrus lets them go mm-hmm. home back to their land to rebuild. Guess what?
Rebuild the temple.
It's the main character of the story.
This is interesting, right? It just completely skips all of that history.
Yeah.
It ends, Jerusalem's captured and burned and destroyed by the Chaldeans and Nebuchadnezzar. And then the next thing is Cyrus is setting them back to rebuild it. And of course, there is a lot of history there.
Yeah. I mean, verse 21 of 2 Chronicles 36 says that they go away into captivity for 70 years. And then 70 years later, we pick the pin back up and we hear what happens later. Right. So there's 70 years of time there that's just missing. Now, we'll read some books that are going to fill in that gap. But, yeah, it just skips, fast forwards to the positive.
But that's the point, right? This was written then. And so, now, so we have all these names. Again, genealogies were huge. Not quite as huge in 2 Chronicles as 1 Chronicles, but this line of kings, these people, this destruction, but this return. So there's always hope. That's another thing when you read a lot of scripture. There's always this little seed of hope in there. Mm-hmm. So we even found that there were people from Israel that come back to Judah, and it's not just Judah or Benjamin. It's there are others. And so the people is going to be rebuilt, right? Yeah. Somehow. Now, again, I believe, and I think you believe, there's a whole lot of prophecy in here where it's not going to be rebuilt quite the way they think it's going to be rebuilt. Yeah. It's not going to return to a situation like with David and Solomon.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of prophecy, which we're going to get to, that tells us otherwise. But this is, in their view, in their mind, right, that would be the thing that made sense. And I think when people read all this, we've got to remember, these were written to those people who thought particular ways, who lived in a particular time. So to them, restoring the kingdom physically is the thing that kind of signals God's, and the temple rebuilt, God's presence returns.
Yeah. Well, let me take us back real quickly to like the very beginning of our reading when we were in Genesis, and when God first started talking to Abraham about what was going to happen with his family. We often summarize that in 3 promises. I'm going to give you a land. I'm going to make you a great people, a great nation, and then through your descendants, I'm going to bless the whole world. And if we've sort of been tracing that, 2 of those 3 promises have been fulfilled, and then the people become so rebellious. Abraham's descendants, who were supposed to bless the world, became so rebellious that they were sent into captivity for 70 years. What we're sort of left with is this question of, well, what now? And I think when they finally come back to the land, this nugget of hope at the end of Chronicles is supposed to remind us, okay, God isn't done with us.
Right.
He still has this promise to fulfill. And so in a lot of ways, throughout the rest of their story, until we get to the New Testament, it's just kind of like waiting for how is he going to bless the world through us? And at least part of that requires the temple and the worship to be set up.
Yep.
And when we get to the New Testament, we'll see.
Can we say second temple?
The second temple. The second temple. Herod's temple, it's sometimes called, yeah. Well, what are we looking forward to? We've got Ezra next week, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther on the docket. What should we be looking for?
Well, a lot more genealogies or lists of names, maybe.
Can't wait.
So those books are going to have, other than Esther, Ezra and Nehemiah will have to do with the actual return. So Cyrus's decree figures in those books too.
Yeah.
So those kind of pick up here.
Yeah.
And then, so we'll have, of course, several groups of people will return. I don't think everybody realizes that, but it's not just one time. Several groups. A group with Zerubbabel, a group with Ezra, a group with Nehemiah, and then there's going to be traffic back and forth. We know that with Nehemiah. He goes and comes back a couple times. So we're going to see that. We're going to see the rebuilding of this temple, this next temple, which will be nowhere near as fancy. Not until Herod rebuilds it as Solomon's temple. But still, the symbology is hugely important. So that's mostly what we're going to see. But we're also going to see these people are still flawed. They still have major problems. They've been heavily influenced by now Persian, Babylonian and Persian culture, which, in prophecy kind of stands for the bad guys, right? Babylon, Rome, kind of the bad guys. So there's still going to be some challenges going forward. But it does feel like idolatry starts to get weeded out.
Yeah.
Not totally.
Well, I think we're going to see some positive things. The people are going to, there's going to be reforms, but they're going to make those reforms. And so keep an eye out for that.
That's a good point. Like, they need to happen, and they happen. And they're pretty serious.
Yeah.
They don't just balk at it and say, forget about it. They actually do the hard work.
So look for that, and we'll talk about that next week.
And then Esther. Esther is just a little bit different.
It is.
Lovely book.
Yeah. Well, enjoy reading Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Come back and join us next week as we discuss it. Go ahead and like the video, subscribe to it, all that good stuff.
Make some comments.
Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. If you find value in this, maybe they will too. But until next time, we'll talk to you guys later.